Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we've got 10 more infinite or instant win combos with a new set, Bloomburrow, coming up. So let's jump right into it with the first one, Starfall Invocation combo. Now Starfall Invocation is a 5 mana sorcery that says you can gift a card. So that means you can promise an opponent a gift as you cast it and they draw a card before the other effects happen. It says destroy all creatures. If the gift was promised, return a creature card put into your graveyard this way to the battlefield under your control. So essentially destroys your creature and then brings it back. Now, if you have Dualcaster Mage here and you have Starfall Invocation on the stack, you can infinitely mill your opponent out. So let me explain how this works. Now you need 8 mana for this to work, right? And you could do this on Arena in Historic or in Modern as well, or older formats. I believe Dualcaster Mage is legal there. So you can pay 5 mana for Starfall Invocation, and what you'd have to do is hold priority while it's on the stack. Then you pay 3 mana for Dualcaster Mage, and when it enters, you target this Starfall Invocation. Now, when you cast the Starfall Invocation, you have to gift the card to the opponent here, because the way you're going to win by doing this is milling your opponent out, forcing them to draw every time. And when the gift is promised, it will return the Dualcaster Mage back from your graveyard to play. So what will happen is the original Starfall Invocation will be on the stack, and then there'll be a copy of it on the stack, right? The copy will resolve, and that will make your opponent draw and destroy all your creatures, and you'll choose Dualcaster Mage to come back into play. Now, when it comes back into play, again, you can target the Starfall Invocation that's still on the stack, create a copy of it. It will make your opponent draw a card, destroy all creatures. Dualcaster Mage will come back and then create a copy of it, make your opponent draw a card, and just do that infinite times, right? So you will infinitely mill out your opponent with this setup, as long as they don't have anything to sort of interrupt this counterspell or anything like that to interrupt it. But these cards are kind of decent on their own, so maybe this could be sort of a combo deck. It is a bit expensive, of course, but it is sort of an instant win 2-card combo. So something to take note of for sure. Okay, next up we've got, this is a standard combo, Innkeeper's Talent, which is a new 2-mana enchantment class. It says at the beginning of combat in your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. 1 mana permanents you control with counters on them have ward 1. And the most important thing is the last level, level 3, which is 4 mana. If you put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many on each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or a player instead. So you may know of this sort of 3 blind mice doppelgang combo, or any ways to turn 3 blind mice into a copy, into a token copy. When you copy it, it becomes a token copy. So it means the second and third chapters on 3 blind mice can now target itself. So you can start to create token copies of itself. So when you do just have those 3 blind mice doppelgang, it will create a copy token of 3 blind mice, and it'll trigger the first saga counter to go on it, and then the next turn, the second one. Then you can start making copies of itself. However, if you have Innkeeper's Talent out and you have the level 3 going, this will kind of instantly, because what will happen is when you have a 3 blind mice come into play, it will then trigger the first and second saga counters to be added to it, because it'll double the amount of counters being added to it. So it will immediately, so for example, if you have the level 3 activated, you have a 3 blind mice and you create a copy of it, the first 2 will then the first 2 saga counters will come onto it. Then you can target itself, right? And then that will create another copy of 3 blind mice. The first 2 saga counters of that will get triggered. It will create a mouse token, and then you can choose to target itself again, and it'll create another one. You can make a mouse token. So you basically get infinite mice tokens here. You also get infinite 3 blind mice enchantments, if that means anything. So yeah, and you can end this infinite combo by targeting a mouse token instead of itself. But this way, the infinite combo happens immediately, and you get entire board of mice in the same turn. So, and all these cards are like kind of okay on their own. So maybe there's some sort of Bant strategy you could play this in, probably against the odds kind of style deck, but could be fun nonetheless. Okay, next up we've got Wick the World Mind, which is a 4 mana legendary rat warlock 2/4. And the ability, we're not going to use the snail sacrifice ability here, but The first one, it says, whenever Wick or another rat you control enters, create a 1/1 black snail creature token. If you don't control a snail, otherwise you put a +1/+1 counter on a snail you control. Now there's this weird card called Conspiracy, which I believe it's legal in Modern and Legacy, older formats like that. I think it was time shifted, that little symbol there. So it's a 5-mana enchantment, and it says when you come to play, you choose a creature type. So in this case, you're going to choose Rat here. And creature cards you own that aren't in play, creature spells you control, and creatures you control are the chosen type. So what this does is it just overrides any sort of creature type on these things, and it makes those things into that type. It doesn't add it as an additional type, it just makes them as that type. So if you have Conspiracy in play and you are naming Rat with this, and then you play Wick, it will trigger its ability when it comes into play, or another rat you control enters. It's going to create a 1/1 black, however, it's going to be a black rat, not a black snail. And it says if you don't control a snail, and you wouldn't have controlled a snail anyways. But what happens is, because it creates a rat token, that triggers the ability again, right? Because this is whenever a rat you control enters. And that is going to create another 1/1 rat. And then that 1/1 rat is going to trigger the ability again, right? Because when a rat has come into play. So there's never a snail coming into play at all. So it just goes infinite, and you create infinite 1/1 rat tokens from this combo. This is sort of like an unbounded loop, I believe. Like there's no, like if you just have these two cards, like I don't know, you'd break Moto or or something. I don't know how this would get resolved in an actual paper game of Magic. If you're a judge, maybe let me know how you would actually resolve this. You probably like have to choose a number and then stop the loop. But if you have something that can sacrifice a creature, that can be a way to both end this loop and also just end the game. Because, for example, Altar of Dementia, you wouldn't have to play another color, which would be nice. You could play this in Commander. Use this combo. So you could sacrifice, once you have infinite rats, or 5,000 rats, however many you want. You start sacrificing. You sacrifice the Wick to stop the loop, and then you sacrifice all your rats to mill out all your opponents, or your opponent, with Altar of Dementia. So that's sort of one example. Any other sort of sacrifice outlet would be useful too, but I thought Altar of Dementia would be nice. You can keep it on color and just win the game immediately from that. So that is Infinite Rat combo with Wick. Next up, we've got Gev. So I had a combo with Gev in my last video, but this one I thought was a little more elegant. And also, all these pieces with Gev are on Arena, so you could play this in Arena if you wanted to, on Historic or Timeless formats. So Gev is a 2-mana 3/2 Lizard Mercenary Legendary. It says Ward, pay 2 life. The key piece is other creatures you control enter with an additional +1/+1 counter on them for each opponent who lost life this turn. Whenever you cast a Lizard spell, it does 1 damage to target opponent. So that can be a way to enable this middle ability of additional +1/+1 counters. But this works really well with persist creatures, right? And the one that is available on Arena and only costs 2 mana is a Putrid Goblin. So if you have a sacrifice outlet, such as Goblin Bombardment, and Goblin Bombardment is pretty good because it satisfies the do damage to your opponent clause here. So if you had these 3 in play, you could sacrifice the Putrid Goblin, right? It would trigger persists, and then it would also do 1 damage to your opponent. So then the Putrid Goblin would come back into play with the +1/+1 counter on it and the -1/-1 counter from persist. However, they would kind of cancel each other out, right? And so it would just come back as a 2/2 again, but you'd have done 1 damage to your opponent. And then you just sacrifice again, it comes back as a 2/2, sacrifice again, it comes back as a 2/2. And then you can just infinitely sacrifice it to do as much damage as you want to your opponent, to their creatures, to whatever you want. So pretty simple, kind of infinite damage, 3 cards. They're all kind of decently playable on their own. So maybe you just fit this into sort of a black-red sacrifice strategy, and have an infinite combo in there as well. So this, I think, has some competitive legs to it. Gev, a very powerful card for sure. Okay, cool. So let's move on to Storm Splitter. So this card just like has combo written all over it, right? And there is an infinite combo, 2-card infinite combo with this, with Sprout Swarm. And so let me read Storm Splitter. It's a 4-mana 1/4 Otter Wizard with haste. This is whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a token that's a copy of it, and exile that token at the beginning of next end step. So Sprout Swarm lets you pay 5 mana essentially to, and you can convoke it, which is important because you can tap uh, the Saproling itself or any other creatures you have, such as copies of Storm Splitter, to pay for the buyback and the cost of the spell, right? And it creates a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. So if you, for example, played Storm Splitter on turn 4 and it lived, hopefully, that's the real question. Competitively, I don't know how viable this is, but if it lived, next turn, say you played 2 cantrips, like card draw spells, then you would create a copy of Storm Splitter on the first spell, and then the second one would create 2 more copies, and now you'd have 4 of them, right? And then if you had a Sprout Swarm in your hand, 1 green mana available, you can start going infinite, right? So you tap 4 of your Storm Splitters in your land to play Sprout Swarm with buyback, and that would create 4 copies of Storm Splitter because you have 4 of them out, and give you a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. You can use the green Saproling creature token to tap to play play it again and the 4 copies of Storm Splitter, and then that would create another 1/1 Saproling and then 8 copies of Storm Splitter. Use 4 of them again and the Saproling to cast the Sprout Swarm with buyback again, and then you create 16 copies, and then you can just go infinite that way, just 2 cards. So that could be, I don't know, I think these are both legal and modern, could be something to explore there. I don't know, I mean, definitely is an instant win, and you can attack with all of them right away because they all have haste, so that's kind of cool. There's an instant win. It is a bit mana, it takes a lot of mana to kind of get this going, and you have to kind of dodge creature removal for it to really go off, but yeah, maybe there's something there, something to think about at least. All right, next up we've got Scavenger's Talent, which is a 1 mana enchantment class. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control die, create a food token. An ability triggers only once each turn. Level 2, when you sacrifice a permanent, target player mills 2 cards. And then level 3, we're not really using, but it says at the beginning for end step, sacrifice 3 other non-land permanents. If you do, return a creature card from a graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So really, the level 2 mode of Scavenger's Talent is important for this one with Forsaken Miner, which says if it's in the graveyard and you committed a crime, you can pay 1 black mana to return it from the graveyard to the battlefield. Now, most importantly, the Scavenger's Talent commits a crime on level 2 because it says target player, and it mills them as well. So that kind of is a way of winning the game if you mill out your opponent, right? So all you need is Phyrexian Altar. Yay, we broke Phyrexian Altar, right? So if you have all 3 of these in play, level 2 on the Talent, Forsaken Miner, and the Phyrexian Altar, you can sacrifice the Phyrexian Miner for black mana, right? Which would then trigger the Scavenger's Talent because you sacrificed a permanent. Target your opponent to mill them for 2, and then use the 1 black mana to return the Forsaken Miner to play. Sacrifice the Forsaken Miner, target your opponent, return it to play, keep going, keep going, keep going, right? In Modern, there's the Worn Soul Trader, which can also be used for this. And you have to pay a life every time you do this. So you'd have to have, if you had 20 life, you could mill your opponent for 40, or I guess a little less than that. But kind of depends on how much life you have and how many cards are left in your opponent's library for this to actually work. But it would sort of work for as much life as you have, basically. Yeah, so that's sort of the infinite mill combo. There's some other combos here with Scavenger's Talent as well, but that one is probably the simplest one. Okay, next up we've got the Starscape Cleric, which enables infinite damage and infinite life gain, although your opponent will probably die before you gain infinite life. But Starscape Cleric is a bat cleric for 2 mana. It's a 2/1 with flying, and it can't block. You can offspring it for 3 mana, which is nice, but not necessary for the combo. Most important line of text is whenever you gain life, each opponent loses 1 life. So there's been other creatures that have been printed that kind of have the same line of text, and it works as an infinite combo with Exquisite Blood, which is a 5 mana enchantment. Whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. So you can kind of see how this works, right? Whenever you gain life, your opponent loses life. And whenever an opponent loses life, you gain that much life. So this kind of creates an infinite combo where the 2 of these trigger back and forth. However, to start the combo, one of the tricky parts of this is that you have to start the combo by either damaging your opponent or gaining some life yourself. So that does kind of create it as like kind of a 3-card combo. However, the Starscape Cleric is pretty good at damaging your opponent just because it is a 2/1 flyer. It has some evasion to it. Or if you had 2 copies of them from the offspring, you have like 2 flyers as well. So I think this is probably the best enabler for this combo that's been printed so far. And it is just one in the same color as it. And it's still kind of a decent card on its own if you're playing like a life gain deck, I suppose. So maybe this could be something. I believe this is legal and historic as well. Maybe modern. Let me know in the comments. I don't know exactly know Exquisite Blood what legality that is, but I think it is on Arena. So um, yeah, this is kind of an exciting kind of infinite 2-card combo that does infinitely instantly win the game if you have a way to damage your opponent, which Starscape Cleric kind of is a way in and of itself. So kind of sweet combo there. Okay, next up we've got Helga, the Skittish Seer, which is a 3-mana 1/3 legendary creature frog druid. Whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value 4 or greater, you draw a card, gain a life, and put a +1/+1 counter on it. And then you can tap it to add mana of any one color, where X is its power. Spend this mana only to cast creature spells with mana value 4 or greater, or creature spells with X in their mana cost. So this combo with Venser and Intruder Alarm, you could play this sort of in your commander deck, or I believe Modern Legacy, this would be legal as well. So um, this creates an infinite loop of many things: infinite card draw, infinite life, infinite mana, infinite +1/+1 counters. You obviously would want to win the game before you drew all the cards in your library. So hopefully you have some way to sort of use all the mana before, for something with mana. A spell with an X spell would be easy to do with Helga, a Fireball or something like that to end the game. So what happens with when you have Helga out and you had Intruder Alarm out, if you cast a Venser, right, it would trigger its first ability to put a +1/+1 counter, gain a life, draw a card, right? Um, and it would give it a second power, right? And so you could tap it to add 2, and then Venser would come into play. Intruder Alarm would trigger because a creature came into play. Venser would target itself, right? And then it would untap the Helga, and then you could tap the Helga for 2 mana again to play the Venser again, put another +1/+1 counter on it. You'd need an extra mana for this to keep going because now it has 3 power. So you just need 1 extra mana because you have to pay 4 for the Venser again, right? And then when you do that again, it would have 4 power, and then you can start going infinite. And then each time you would do this, you get another +1/+1 counter. So then you start to net mana each time you'd play the Venser, bounce itself, trigger the Intruder Alarm, untap the Helga, and kind of go through it infinite times. So you would start netting mana, drawing your whole life, gaining life, putting +1/+1 counters on it. You could probably just use like a fling effect if you wanted to, or something like that if you wanted to as well. Any sort of X spell would work as well to kind of finish the game, as long as it's in your deck. So you draw your whole deck if you want to. So it's kind of a sweet infinite combo here. I don't know how realistic it is, but kind of fun to think about. Okay, next up we've got a pretty simple one. And this one I think is legal in Pioneer as well as older formats from that. But Season of the Burrow is a 5-mana sorcery. It says choose up to 5 paws worth of modes, and you can choose the same mode more than once. So 1 paw to create a 1/1 white rabbit creature token. 2 paws, exile target non-land permanent. Its controller draws a card. 3 paws, return target permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield with an indestructible counter on it. So this works really well with Devilish Valet, one of my favorite cards. Love the combos with this guy because you can just do absurd things, and there's certainly lots of like 3-card, 4-card combos that create infinite tokens that just you can do infinite damage with him. But this is a very simple kind of 2-card combo where you just have a valet out, and then you play Season of the Burrow, and that you just choose the first mode 5 times. uh, and you create 5 rabbits, and then it triggers the Alliance ability, doubles it, so it goes to 2, 4, 6. I mean, sorry, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. 32 damage, and you attack. and hopefully, that will kill your opponent because it has trample. So even if they have some blockers, that can easily be a lethal attack. Um, the other thing about this combo is that the Season of the Burrow, the other abilities are decent. The card's kind of pretty flexible in and of itself, of course. But the last ability, if your Devilish Valet dies, you can use the Season of the Burrow to bring it back, right, into play. So if you had drawn 2 of the Season of the Burrows, you can actually use it to reanimate your Devilish Valet with an indestructible counter on it. So pretty decent against a deck if you're facing a lot of removal. So maybe these cards could go in the same deck. Not sure how competitive that is, but there's certainly some pretty good synergy between these 2 cards. So maybe I'll try to make it work in Explorer or something and see what happens. But I thought that would be a fun combo. All right, and then lastly, we've got the infamous Cruelclaw, and I'm sure you've probably seen ideas around this guy, of course, but just the idea of having free game-winning spells, being able to cast spells for free. So let me read him. It's 3 mana for a 3/3 Weasel Mercenary with Menace. And when he deals combat damage to a player, exile cards from top of your library until you exile a non-land card. You can cast the card by discarding a card rather than paying its mana cost. So anything that lets you play something without paying its mana cost certainly has the potential to be quite broken. And kind of the combo with this guy is cards that you want to cast for free. For example, Emrakul in older formats. And then cards that kind of set up the top of your library so you can just control what you cast, basically. So Insatiable Avarice in Standard could be good. I know there's a lot of big creatures, Atraxa or whatever, just kind of cast that for free in Standard, but Emrakul seemed probably, you basically usually win the game if you went, turn 3 this, turn 4 Avarice. In older formats, maybe you play like a Grixis deck with like Brainstorm, like in Timeless, you could do that. And you sort of set up the top of your deck with Brainstorm and then cast a giant Eldrazi that way. Something along those lines. You could even play this guy on turn 2 with like Birds of Paradise on turn 1. And then turn 3, set up the top of your deck and cast a giant Eldrazi that way. So lots of kind of game-winning abilities on this guy, and lots of fun to be had, I think, with the infamous Cruelclaw. I know I'm for sure going to be building some decks on this channel around this guy in a few different formats. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. That is the 10 more infinite or game-winning combos that I could think of. Shout out to people in my chat who gave me suggestions for infinite combos or game-winning combos, because I've used some of them in this video. So I really appreciate your ideas and people who, who have sort of messaged below. So if you have any other ideas for cool combos you're looking forward to, or decks that you want to build with Bloomburrow, or just what's your hype level for the set, any cool ideas, I love to hear them and may use them for a video in the future. So again, thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next video.